those daily things that populate motherhood. They're usually repetitive. They're usually somewhat monotonous or boring. They're doing the laundry or doing the dishes, and you're moving one thing to another thing to another place, you know? And I feel like that can be, on the one hand, frustrating, but there's an opportunity for it to be something else, and for it to be like a ritual, and for it to be something that you can slow yourself down and sort of appreciate the repetitive nature and find a pace that might provide you some joy or comfort just when you pay attention to that repetition. I'm Catherine Reinhart, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist. And typically I make fiber art, sculpture, and then do socially engaged art, mostly with abandoned textiles, domestic textiles. And I do artwork around the themes of domestic labor, connection, and caregiving. I've never not been both artist and mother. So when I got out of graduate school in March 2012, I had my thesis, I was ready to be a professional artist. And then March 2013, I had my daughter, and she was pretty unplanned, but amazing. It was an amazing experience. So I was right out of the gate like a young artist and a young mom. And at that time, my husband also went to graduate school, and so I just decided, you know, I've always wanted to be home with the kids, like when they're really young, in that really sort of pivotal, rich time of development. I want to be the primary sort of input in their lives, right? But I can't not make art as well, or else I'm a horrible human. And so I was just mothering them and developing my art career, and I realized there is a lot of richness like in this sort of mothering thing, which is a common, really, I mean, half the world's population will like bear and raise children. I mean, most, you know, it's a really universal experience, right? But modern depictions of womanhood from women artists is really lacking in contemporary art. We have maybe idealized, historic depictions of motherhood, but they're like made by men, or they're sort of somewhat idyllic with mother and baby, you know? And I wasn't really interested in doing that, but I found like, just by opening up my eyes to what was happening around me, like, oh, my daughter she collects all these little things, and she's making little arrangements, and that's really interesting. Maybe I can mimic that in some way. Or like, oh, there's dirty laundry on the floor. I'm really loving the shape of that, so I'm gonna trace all of her socks. It was the soup I was swimming in. Representation in the art world matters, and I think this is changing, and it's been changing maybe the last 50 years, but modern representation of contemporary art by women who choose to be mothers or who are caregiving in different capacities, there's just not a lot of that left, or, you know, like in contemporary art. So it's exciting to do that, and it's also like connects with a lot of people too, because people, if you don't have experience of being a mother, you have experience of being cared for and mothered by someone in your life. Here at the Yes House, I did a performance called Burdens and Bundles, which is a durational performance where I wrapped my bundles of my son's hair sort of methodically over 2 hours. And this performance in particular is about motherhood and the invisible labor of motherhood, and also those small accumulations of loss that kind of grow when you're a mother or when you're caregiving. The air of the performance is sort of somber, and during these 2 hours, I wrap individual bundles of my son's hair that I've collected over years and years of giving him haircuts. And this performance serves to mark the passing of time. It also is about the invisible labors of motherhood. I even have like this uniform sort of that I'm wearing now, this pink jumpsuit that I put on, do my labors, and then take off as sort of like a delineation of the difference between, I don't know, like going to work as a mother, I guess, and just defining that a little bit more. But also another big part of the work is about grief and loss, and the title Bundles and Burdens reflects the dichotomy in motherhood. So when you're caregiving for a person, you have this deep love for them that propels you to like do all of this difficult repetitive labor out of love for them. And so it's often filled with moments of joy and moments of like burden, or like it's heavy. The process, kind of like motherhood, is pretty monotonous or boring almost. Like, I don't know if it's boring to watch, but it's hard for me to pay attention while I'm doing it. But there's sort of this compulsion to keep going and to not stop. And then I'm always surprised after the 2 hours about how many curls I actually wrapped, and then also how many I still have left to do. I don't have it set up here, but how I make them is on one side of me, I have this bowl of hair clippings that I've collected since my kid was a baby, and he has these beautiful curls. And then I put them in a jig that people use to tie flies for fly fishing. And so I have each one of these curls has a little piece of copper wiring. And I collected the wiring from my old house and then my old studio. I kind of scrounge it from construction sites, cut it into little pieces, and then I put the copper in. I use fly tying tools with just common sewing thread, and I'll wrap thread around the copper first to get it anchored, and then I pick up a curl, place the curl on the piece of copper, and then proceed to tie that bundle to the piece of copper. And these curls vary in weight and length. Let's see if I can find. This is a very skinny, long one. They each have a little personality, really, and I find a lot of joy out of each one of them. And they make a really nice, wonderful sound. So after I'm done, I then drop them. And so I just wrap, drop for like 2 hours straight with some stretching in between. Beginning in about 2021, I started, so I am not a sculptor. I work mostly with textiles, but I had this compulsion to start working with other materials. And so at an artist residency, I started making things like this from paper pulp. And I just loved working with new materials. And so throughout a couple residencies, I had the time and the space and the money to just play around. And so I started making these small sculptures, which are like house tops of these vintage Polly Pocket toys. And these ones in particular are made out of crayon wax. So like these are also made out of common materials that you'd find like in a home. So like papers everywhere, right? Often you can make paper with like discarded boxes or wrappers or something, and you can blend it up and make paper pulp. And then I just made so many of these little house shapes. This is with beeswax, and it's hard to see, but it's got embedded hair from my dad in there, actually. And then I was doing crazy things like, I'll just stick a bunch of yarn in it. And you know, some of these are like more successful than others. And I like to also make arrangements with found materials. So I'll find, I don't know, find things anywhere. These are like little, these are fly fishing. They're like hooks, right? But I love the little puffy balls. And this one is a worm, which is like made from a pipe cleaner, which is also a child's play material. So I really like subverting what is fine art, right? You know, what materials can be used in a gallery, and, you know, combining things I make with things that were created industrially or created by someone, unknown person. I think what I want to talk about too, with this performance in particular, this is the second time I've done it, and it's the first time I have been under this ladder, which is totally a result of being in the space and how to light the table. And so, but what I really want to share is that this feeling of being trapped or cramped, or like it's sort of an anxious feeling being under here and doing these motions. I haven't done this performance for a few months, but recently I've had these sort of really scary encounters with other close friends, women in my life, and in particular with like medical emergencies. So a month ago, my friend was in the hospital for 8 days with sepsis, and she's a mom of 5 young kids, the oldest who is 13. And I've worked with her on art stuff before, and she nearly died because of this mysterious infection. And then 2 weeks ago, I had a young friend who had an ectopic pregnancy, which is a sort of non-viable pregnancy that ruptured, and she was bleeding internally, and it was really scary. I was like with her when she was like on the ground in pain, and she's young. And then just this week before I came to do this performance, I had another friend who's maybe 36, 38. She's not very old, and she told us that she has breast cancer. And so all of these women were young and healthy, and they all were sort of like mothers in some capacity. And so doing this performance in this posture under this ladder, which is like kind of a traditional, You know, this is like bad luck, right? To sit under the ladder, you're just inviting a curse when you're under here. You know, and there's something that connects with how I've been feeling about reflecting on what's happened to my friends and what could happen to me and the labors that I'm trying to do in art and mothering, and how precarious it is to like do those things. I don't know, under threat of what might happen. I don't know. It's been interesting and very timely to be here and to do this performance. Even like doing the performance, not a lot of people came. I mean, to be honest. And that's a little disappointing as an artist, right? But pretty common. I've done things before and nobody shows up. But I really, while I was thinking about that, I was thinking about how analogous that is to motherhood, which is like the labors of motherhood are quite invisible to the whole of society, you know, like once a year during Mother's Day, like that's when we're like, hey mom, you're great. But other than that, like, do we even thank the people that like take care of us? Even servers at restaurants or all these people who sort of like take care of what we need. And, you know, I just thought it was so interesting that it might be like doing a performance about the invisibility of motherhood, and it's, you know, and then like people don't see it or whatever. So I'm excited like that people get to like see this video and know more, you know, maybe the performance will have a life in that way. I could have stopped doing the performance at any time if no one came. But I did not choose to do that. I chose to continue even though nobody was watching me. And that is very much tied into motherhood, you know. Nobody's watching you in your home, like it's just you, right? You get to make the decisions about what you do and what you don't do, and you have some agency there, you know. But the work, you know, goes on.